Hi, I'm Phil. This is Phil with Phacts, and today we are making mead. Yeah, I said it. Mead. Today's mead is a very special recipe of mine. I call it Elder Dragon's Mead. Does the name really matter all that much? No, but it's how I know that this is my elderberry. Bleh. Does the name matter all that much? Not really. I made this recipe up myself. I make it with elderberries, hence Elder Dragon. But you can call it whatever you want. You can even just call it elderberry mead, and that's fine too. Alright, so today we're making 1 gallon of mead. It's going to be 1 gallon carboy. If you have the wide mouth kind, that's okay too. Just gotta have something you can put an airlock on at the end. So even a bucket would work, but if this is your first time making mead or your first time making this recipe and you're only making 1 gallon, I recommend using this guy right here. Honestly, use what you have access to. There'll be some links in the description below. To start, we're going to make an elderberry tea. I have 4 cups of water in this pot already. To that, I'm going to add 1 cup of dried elderberries. If you have fresh, go for that too. I had access to this. I'll put a link to this in the description below as well. So if you want to do this exact recipe, that's how that will happen. To that, we're going to add 1 black tea bag. Now, I called this a tea. It's really just some elderberries, any other things that you might add to it yourself. I'm not calling it a tea because of the tea bag itself. That's just there to give a little bit of tannins to the final product. We're not going to make it like a conventional tea. You can probably drink it like a conventional tea, but it's probably going to be very bitter when it's done in here. I also want to add a little bit of lemon zest. This is strictly just a little bit of flavor and a little bit of something for the yeast as they are brewing. We'll get more into that a little bit later on. You don't need a lot. You just want a few of those little orange oils. If you want to use the whole orange, use the whole orange. I usually use about 1/4 of it, roughly. Once you have all your ingredients together, we are going to bring this to a simmer. It's going to simmer for about 10 minutes. Let's go. I decided to put my setup here just so you guys could see what I was doing next. But yeah, our tea is in this pot. I have it at a 5 right now, which would be a high flame. I'm going to lower it to about a 3, a medium, because I don't really want to boil this. I really just want to get it hot, and then I want it to simmer down and really just get all the flavors out of the elderberry, get all the flavors out of the orange. It's a good time, and it actually makes everything smell amazing. Next, what we're going to do is hydrate our yeast. And yeah, just hydrate. We're not going to give them a yeast starter. We're not going to do anything fancy like that. I just like them to start to wake up when we enter them into the mead so that all the honey doesn't shock their system and you get a dud. You can, if you are stubborn, just take the yeast, pour it right on top of the must when we are done with that, and it should work. I just like doing it this way, and I've never had an issue doing it. I'm going to add half a packet, and I'm going to save the other half for a different recipe. Why half a packet? Because 1 packet makes 5 gallons of product. So if I scaled it down, I would need 1/5 of the packet. But 1/5 of the packet isn't a whole lot of yeast, and they might not start up. So typically I just go half a packet if I'm doing 1 gallon. That's what I recommend. You could feel free to disagree or be as stubborn as you want. I just know this works for me. Next, we're going to let this run its course, and I will get back to you then. Alright, so this went for about 10 minutes. Then we took it off the heat and let it steep for about another 10 minutes. It's still pretty hot, but it's workable. I have a strainer and I have a pitcher. We're going to start to assemble everything now. So from this point forward, everything that your brew touches needs to be sanitized. I use Star San. It's the sanitizer that works for me. I put it into a bucket with some hot water, and I just put everything I'm going to use that day into that bucket. That's about as detailed as you need to get with it. Any food grade sanitizer will work just fine, but make sure you're using something. It will prevent anything extra or anything that might have already been on something from spoiling your brew. That's what you want to avoid. It's not a good time. I'm here to have a good time, so that's why I do it. We're going to take our pot. We are going to carefully strain Now I'm going to put everything I'm going to need to assemble on this table, and then I'm going to show you guys how to finish off this meat. Okay, so assembly. What we're going to start with is 1 box of dried cranberries. The box is 1 ounce, and I used the whole box, the whole ounce, because it's easy for me to record when I'm writing recipes out. If you don't like cranberry, some people don't, you can use dried raisins. We're going to roughly chop this. Take our carboy, and put them right in. And yes, my hands are sanitized. Wash, dried, and then sanitized. I recommend you do the same. To this, we're now going to add 3 pounds of honey. This is a 5-pound container. I've worked with it a lot, and I can very easily eyeball out 3 pounds of honey. You can weigh it with a scale if you'd like. I just didn't really feel like digging mine out. And pour. This might take a minute. Alright. Pouring the honey might be the hardest part of this day, but it is worth it. I try to warm the honey up a little bit in the sanitizer before I pour it. That usually makes it a little bit easier. This is Happy Belly Wildflower Honey. That was just the brand I had access to for this video. I usually say you should try to use something more local because it helps support your local economy, but honestly, if you like the honey, use that honey. Honey is one of the only ingredients in this, or at least there's not many, and honey is one of the main ingredients in this. And you want it to be something good. Next thing, I'm going to use the same funnel, and I'm not going to wash it out because there's still honey in this funnel. I'm going to pour in our tea. The tea is still a little warm at this stage, which is beautiful because it's going to help melt any extra honey out of the funnel. We're just going to set this down now. I'm going to take this stopper, put it in the top of my fermenter, put my thumb over the hole, and now we're just going to shake. What we're doing now is mixing in the honey into the actual product. The yeast will still probably eat it, but you won't be able to get a good reading off of it, so you'll want to shake it up. I should say I'm also getting air into this. I know that people generally don't want to get air into their brew, but when you first start any brew you make, whether it's a beer, a wine, a mead, you want to get a lot of oxygen into the liquid at the very beginning, because the yeast are going to need that oxygen to get going. If you notice, I might need more liquid. It happens. I'm also only filling it about halfway for this step, and that is mainly because it's heavy. It's not overly heavy, but it's a little bit of a workout, and the more liquid you add to it now, the heavier it's going to be. And I like to just make life easy on myself. That's how I look at things. You do what you're comfortable with. They also make wands and all kinds of stirrers. You can put on a drill and mix everything around in here. This is glass. I just really didn't want to mess around with that. And I don't want to go on camera and say you need to buy all of this equipment and all of this stuff to make a mead. It's a really simple thing to make. They were making it thousands of years ago before any of that equipment. So I think you could have a pretty easy time making it with just a few things. Alright, now I'm going to add the rest of our water. And we want to leave a little bit of headroom, and I also want to leave a little bit of room for the yeast. This is looking good. So now, just give it a couple more shakes, get everything incorporated. Look at the color on that. That's so cool. Now what I want to do is just take a reading. I want to see where my product is at. This is a hydrometer. They are not expensive, and it's one of the only really specialized pieces of equipment I say you absolutely need before you start brewing. There's a few different models you can get. There's a scale on the side. It gives you some numbers. You can use those numbers now to find out how much sugar is in this product and how much the yeast eat towards the end. So we take an initial reading, and then every time I rack this, I'm going to take a reading, and it's going to let me know where my brew is. This way, if anything happens, if it stalls, if it's not working right, if the yeast gave up, or if it goes dry and it's done, I know by the readings. I recommend it. I would say don't try brewing without it. That's all I really have to say on it. We hit 1.13, which is a very respectable reading for a beginning of a must. What that tells me is there's enough sugar in this that if I let it go completely dry, it'll end up in 17% alcohol by volume, ABV. And that's nice. And it might not go completely dry. That happens. Or I might stop it sooner and end up with 15% in a slightly sweeter product. When you're drinking mead, people expect it to be sweet, so you kind of want it to be. And we're not going to waste this. I don't honestly know why you would. I'm getting a little bit more oxygen into my product. Right now, what we have is a must. If we were making beer, this would be a wort. I don't really call what you call it. It's just an unfermented mead. As soon as I add yeast, that changes. They're going to start working, and they're going to start turning this into a mead. And I think that's the only thing we have left to do. Now, my yeast water is cloudy. There's a few bubbles, but I'm going to guess it's more air. But right now, they're awake. They look like they're alive. And we're going to pour them right on in. The only thing we have left to do is put in the stopper. And you want to really try to get it in there at the beginning. This is going to create some pressure, push up, and it could push the cork out. Doesn't usually happen. I'm just saying, be on the lookout and press down. Very last thing is this airlock. Now, is this super critical? It is, it isn't. People use different things. This is a little overfull right now. I'm trying to get some water out. What this does is let any pressure that's building up in here out, but doesn't let anything get back in. That's real live bugs like flies. You will often see a fly in one of these two chambers and never gets past that. This stuff is super sweet and bugs love it. It also doesn't let any extra oxygen or anything in the air get into your product. You have pets, this prevents that, anything at all. When you first start brewing, I don't know if you can tell, but the water lines are equal. As this starts to get going, it's going to push up through this first chamber and your water is going to be in here. It's also going to bubble, it's going to make noises, that's all okay. This is going to get really foamy, that's going to leave a line on your carboy. That's also perfectly okay. It's something you actually want to see. It means it's working. If this isn't bubbling after a day or two, press down, make sure you have a seal. If it's still not, take another reading, see if it's moved. It's possible your yeast died. You might have to add more. After that initial start, should be smooth sailing, but we're going to let this go probably for about a month, and then I'll make another video on what you do with it next. Alright everybody, this is the final facts. So today's recipe was my Elder Dragon Mead. This is going to need at least a month in primary. What that means is we're going to store this somewhere, cool and dark. You want it not too cool. Basically you want it under 100 degrees, above 30 degrees. It should work just fine. The yeast will do what they do. They will ferment this must into a mead, and then we'll talk about the next stages, which will be secondary fermentation and different options you have along the way if you want to stop it earlier or if you want to let it go a little bit longer. There's a lot of things you can do with a brew as you're going, but that's all we have for this particular one. You'll notice I labeled it. So I wrote its name, which, as I said, I named this one. This is my recipe. But if you want to give it a different name or just strictly say Elderberry Mead, go for it. The date, and then the specific gravity, which is what I got from the hydrometer. And then that's it. Oh, I will say, if you don't want to use honey, if you just don't have any or it's hard to get, you can replace the honey for sugar. Try to get the same ABV. They usually work pretty evenly, so instead of 3 pounds of honey, use 3 pounds of sugar. You might have to add a little bit more. You might want to add a little bit less and take a reading first. If you do that, you will make a really good elderberry wine. It's very interchangeable. Go to your comfort level. Mead is expensive to make, and if you've never made one before, or if you just really haven't brewed a lot, I recommend starting out with sugar over. Once you get comfortable with what you are doing, once you know a little bit, you've done it a few times, then there's no harm in switching out sugar for honey. Most of my recipes are very interchangeable in that way. But that's all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more videos like this or see more of my recipes, please like, subscribe, leave a comment asking for specific things. I'm always down to answer that or make other videos. You guys let me know. And until next time, cheers.